Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ernest Darkoh. I am the co-founder of the BroadReach Group. I also have the honor of being on the board of the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs. And I have the pleasure of being your moderator this afternoon of this discussion. I want to introduce my esteemed panel. To my left is Dr. Ahmed Ogwell Ouma, the acting director of the Africa Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. Next to him is Dr. Monika Lessl, executive director of the Bayer Foundation. And then next to her is Säbeen Fatima Haque, co-founder and executive director of doctHERs. And then we have Stephen MacMillan, chairman, president, and CEO of Hologic. Before we proceed with the discussion, I would like us to watch a short video that will just set the scene for the discussion that we're about to have. COVID-19 laid bare a lot of the pre-existing challenges that many actors have long been trying to address. We hear the term health equity now, and I like to point out that it's nothing new. I think it's been the thing that we've all been trying to achieve for many, many decades and failing. But I believe COVID-19 has finally given us the impetus and the motivation for why we need to actually solve this urgently. I think prior to this, we became comfortable with our discomfort, meaning that we knew we had big problems and would chip away at them in a marginally incrementalist way. However, COVID-19 made it clear that little marginal incremental shifts are not going to be good enough. And as we saw, COVID-19 brought down the house. Not only did it bring down the house in every sense of the word, because it affected healthcare directly of individuals, but more importantly, it affected the drivers, the social determinants of health. And it showed that how interconnected all these things were. But more importantly, one of the unique features of this particular pandemic was the fact that it was a disease that took out the first responders who were supposed to actually be leading the redress of the pandemic. So when you combine that all together, I think it was a big wake-up call for needing to get our house in order. Now, when we look at the big problems that result in health equity and our reflection of health equity, access for large swaths of populations around the world remain a big issue, right? And that's access to health services, access to social services. These remain big, big challenges. And nobody has been able to solve them, and nobody has easy answers to them. However, there has been a group of intrepid entrepreneurs who have decided that they're going to make it their life's work to solve some of these big challenges. And these are our social entrepreneurs. And I'm happy to hear and to see that finally there's an acknowledgement of what this interesting group of entrepreneurs has to offer, because they do seem to have truly effective and scalable solutions to some of these big existential problems, some of these big rocks that are related to access, related to lack of equity, related to lack of inclusivity. And the way I see it, given if we acknowledge that these are the big problems, we should be extremely interested in those people who have solutions to these, and we should be extremely interested in partnering with them, because that is the only way we'll be able to solve some of these in relatively short time frames. And also ways of shortening the learning curve to getting it right, because we cannot expect to wait lifetimes before we solve these problems. So with that in mind, there's the Global Alliance for Social Entrepreneurship. I'm really excited about that. There's been announcements about it at this particular forum, and I hope all of us will partner with this alliance so that this alliance can grow. This alliance really aims at showcasing what social entrepreneurs can do, but more importantly, institutionalizing them as part of the default model for how we address these issues related to equity and inclusion. And this discussion is going to really focus on unpacking some of the challenges, but more importantly, some of the actions that we can take and the role that social entrepreneurs can play as part of the solution. So I'd like to start by asking a question to our panelists. And the first question is, I'll pose to Dr. Ouma, is the Africa CDC played a pivotal role in steering the continent through the COVID-19 pandemic. And more importantly than that, the Africa CDC gave the continent an ability, I think for the first time in my public health lifetime, to speak almost as one voice. And you, in essence, became a center of gravity around which the right collaborative actions could be taken. From the vantage point of having been through that experience, be interested to learn what are the most glaring challenges to health equity, and specifically in Africa, that you see? And then secondly, based on your experience as the Africa CDC, have you seen any good examples where private sector and have been able to partner with governments, civil society, and social innovators for positive benefit?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question, and good afternoon. Of the many challenges that we have, two really stand out for us at Africa CDC, indeed in the continent. The first is the sheer lack of learning from lessons. Mm-hmm. We've been through so many of these cycles, exactly, but we just don't learn lessons. And our inability to learn means that the next outbreak, yes, God forbid, the next pandemic, is going to be even worse, because there'll be a lot of regret, there'll be a lot of expectations, exactly, and there'll still be no lessons learned. Exactly. We are not yet out of this pandemic, but we are still seeing the sheer lack of, exactly, learning lessons. So if there's one thing that will be useful to do in this space, it is learning lessons. Exactly. Second challenge that is our ability to talk about the problems without taking action about the solutions. Okay. So we don't learn lessons, but then when it comes to talking about it, we do a lot of that. And we've spent time on virtual platforms throughout the pandemic, exactly, talking about it. Exactly. Taking action has become slow, and the most painful example I can give is what happened at the World Trade Organization during the pandemic, implementing the TRIPS flexibilities, something that is self-executing, does not need anything to be discussed, was discussed and discussed and discussed, and a new agreement allegedly made that had nothing to do with the original, exactly, TRIPS flexibilities. So we don't take action. We talk about it, we don't take action. So these two things for me really stand out. Now, in terms of the innovation space, what we've decided to do on the continent is to get our innovators, particularly the young people, to be part of thinking of solutions. And there are many innovation hubs across the continent now that are coming up with practical, possible solutions to the challenges that we are facing on the continent. Our new public health order, Pillar 4, is all about partnerships. We believe strongly that it is time for us to do it on our own, but it doesn't mean we do it alone. Exactly. We need partnerships. We don't want to learn this, to go through the same painful experiences. Exactly. We want to learn from others. But if we don't do this on our own, then it's not going to be done because of the two challenges that are given in the beginning. Exactly. So there are many innovation hubs, and it cuts across. It's academia, it is private sector, it is government, and individuals who are contributing their knowledge into the process of trying to come up with new things that can be used as solutions for the challenges that we are facing. I am looking into the future very, very encouraged, and hopefully the next time I'm in Davos, certainly not in a year, hopefully longer than that, but it will be nice to speak about this is the solution that we've come up with for this particular problem, and it has come from innovators on the continent because we are taking over the responsibility of providing those solutions.
Okay. Our seemingly constant inability to act well, to implement well, is a theme I've seen in my 25-year career in public health. And I'd like to come back to that thematically as a question maybe later on. But moving on, Monika, this panel actually coincides, I think, with the release of a very, very timely report speaking to these issues that we're talking about. I won't steal your thunder, so I want you to tell us about the report, and most importantly, some of the key findings, what you found surprising maybe within that, and then also where you see the greatest opportunities for multi-stakeholder action.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The study is about towards inclusive health in Africa. But before going into this, allow me just a few words about the Bayer Foundation. So the Bayer Foundation's vision is to advance science and social innovation for a world with health for all and hunger for none. And I'm a scientist, and therefore I really like to build action on data. Yeah? And that's also why we have conducted that report and that research study. So we partnered up with the Alliance for Social Entrepreneurs and with the Schwab Foundation to do this research. And it's also an interesting way the research has been done. So as we used, on one hand, an AI-driven type of research from Impact Intelligence, where they analyzed more than 2 million publications, be it either posts or papers or whatever, and out of them filtered about 450,000, which were then analyzed and go into the report. And on the other hand, there were about 40-hour interviews with experts on the ground in Africa, because that was very important for us, and then also several workshops. And in the report, we then identified quite a number of barriers, which are not so surprising, like a lack of health infrastructure, lack of access to good quality health, and so on. But it's also good to confirm that it's not just our feeling that we have this confirmed. But what was very interesting is that we also identified, as you said, Ernest, in the beginning, entrepreneurs who kind of addressed these barriers and developed innovative solutions. And we were also looking at the solution space and an area where there is already kind of an environment which fosters certain types of solutions. And that's kind of a sweet spot where we can come together and support in a right way. And I want to give you 2 examples. And one is kind of very much connected to what you said. One was also about providing more entrepreneurial environment, supporting entrepreneurs. And I think also given the fact that, there has been a recent youth study where, more than 3,000 young people were interviewed in Africa across countries, and 75% of them said, yeah, I'm very interested to start my own business. That's much more than from Germany, for example, where I'm coming from. And also they said that the biggest challenge for them is health. So I think there is a huge entrepreneurial potential, as you said, but we can join forces to provide a good ground so that these ideas can grow and get nurtured. Yeah. So from our foundation, we have also started a so-called Women Empowerment Award, where we award outstanding women leaders in the field of health and also nutrition with a prize, but also, and this came out of the report, non-financial support is equally important, yeah? Be it expertise, be it accelerators, helping to build a business model. So, and I think that's really something where we as a community can help and support them. And if you allow me, give me one other example that also came out of the report, that was paying system for healthcare. So there is also a lack of easy paying systems. And there's also a nice example of a social entrepreneur called M. Tomadi. So they are active in Madagascar. And if you are a woman in a rural area in Madagascar, you have no access to healthcare. Yeah? So it's far away. And that's why also the mortality rate for mothers is very high in Madagascar. So, and what these social entrepreneurs did, they built a digital platform where they connect the stakeholders. So, sounds quite abstract, but it means that this young woman or mother, she can easily enroll with a scratch card. She doesn't need a super fancy phone. So she can enroll and get access to either public support systems, to patient enrollment systems, or she can also save a little money, or relatives or other donors can save money, and then she has access to the relevant clinic or health services. So it's also for the health services way easier, because the claims time, for example, went down from more than 60 days to only 20 minutes, because it's all run through mobile money. Yeah? So, and these kind of easy payment systems are really need to build so that people are not excluded because they don't have a bank account from the health systems. Yeah. And yeah, with this, I think we will looking for partners, and also will continue to collaborate with the Alliance to really look at these sweet spots where we can make a change if we collaborate and advance the healthcare.
Great, thank you. Säbeen, you're a social entrepreneur, and you've been recognized as such during this particular World Economic Forum, and congratulations on all the work you've done. I think you're the best person to answer this question, right? Why do you think social entrepreneurs and innovators are one of the key groups that can drive the needed systemic change? And then also, now related to that, what are the biggest challenges that you think face social entrepreneurs, and what might be some of the solutions?
Okay, thank you. And I see a lot of social entrepreneurs in the room as well. I think I speak for all of us that we typically live and breathe the problems that we're facing or solving, right? And we're on the grassroots level, we're on the ground. When we look at health equity, anyone can look at the stats and say, great, we have 4 billion people who lack access to healthcare. We have a shortage of 18 million healthcare providers. When I look at that problem, I go to the root cause. Exactly. So when I'm looking at why are female healthcare providers invisible, why are they underemployed, we're going and finding out the reasons. Exactly. Now in Pakistan, 4 out of 5 women graduate from med school, only 1 out of 4 go on to practice. Exactly. It's because of social cultural issues. Mm-hmm. But when we look in other countries, it could be because they're being discriminated. Exactly. Maybe there's harassment, there's occupational segregation. There could be a lot of different issues. So we go and we try to find those issues. Mm-hmm. In our organization, we're helping circumvent. So in Pakistan, those same women who were not working are now working at home through telemedicine. Mm-hmm. So we've been able to bring back, female doctors that way. When we look at the demand side, when we look at supply and demand, when we look at the other side, that people lack access to healthcare, why is that? And we actually go and try to find out more. There was a stat, I remember one year, that stated that 48% of women in Pakistan don't even have a say in matters of their own health. Mm-hmm. We wanted to go investigate that more, so we did. And when I go into rural communities where 85% of the country doesn't have access to healthcare, we find out that stat is, it's really underreported. Women don't, they don't have a say in matters of their own health. A lot of times they can't access healthcare without a male sponsor or family member. They're not even aware of some of the different resources available to them.
Right.
So I think when we social innovators look at the problem, we get on that level. If I was to list a few other reasons, we're agile. That's in our DNA. And we saw that across COVID, where overnight social entrepreneurs were able to help build systems, lend our technologies and help scale solutions very quickly.
Exactly.
We partnered with the private sector, with governments, and overnight really build shop, and we were able to create impact. I think we're resourceful because we're used to operating under constraints. And I really wish that partners would understand that more. It means that we can be cost effective, we can be innovative, we can stretch that dollar out much more. A lot of times we lose out to bids because we might not have the most fanciest portfolio or a big name behind us, and a lot of projects go to agencies, and then those agencies come to us and say, "Can you implement this for us?" Our approach is being collaborative. That's something that we do. And we see that work is happening all around us, and it's happening in silos. And part of the way we view the ecosystem is we're trying to see who can we collaborate with, who can we partner with, right? And that actually creates more impact.
Okay.
So these are some ways that I think social entrepreneurs view issues. In terms of failures or challenges, I think it would be pretty standard access to finance, investment. Human talent is something when you're a startup, trying to find talent that's there and able to execute. Sometimes you find people that are capable, but are they mission aligned? Are they value? Are they aligned on value? So sometimes you get a mix of that, and that's something I know I faced, and a lot of the other social entrepreneurs I work with face that as well. In terms of success, I think what's really helped us personally, and I'll give you an example, is working with partners, whether it's corporate partners, bilateral, multilateral partners. One of the programs that we've executed in Pakistan, it was with Transform. It was funded by DFID and Unilever Global. And we wanted to reach out to women in rural Pakistan. Unilever had access to last mile rural markets, and they had a sales and marketing team that would send out 40 teams daily, and they would go out to different villages, and they would set up a camp, and they would go door to door and sell their products and create awareness on hand washing and nutrition and things like that. We asked them, can you add 2 of our health workers to your teams? So we started going out, and not only did we create awareness on different health issues, but we set up a little health camp, and it would have a health worker who was connected with a tablet, and we were able to connect communities to female doctors. For us, though, that we didn't stop there. When we looked at the program, we realized that, yes, we're creating awareness, and communities are speaking to our doctors, but what was missing was continuity of care. Our doctors didn't feel that that was the best use, because we were seeing patients and then we were gone, and we were not back for another 4 months. So we started iterating that process, and now what we've done is we've gone out and we found frontline health workers across 3,000 villages, and now we've trained and equipped these women with the tablet, and they can go door to door, they can create health awareness, they can connect communities to doctors, therapists, even pharmacists. Unilever is using the same women as last mile micro retailers.
Exactly.
So initially they gave them a basket of goods and they could sell their products. And then when COVID happened, we were able to add masks and sanitizers and all sorts of things like that. And not only now, initially this, the supply chain was Unilever's, we were leveraging that. We've brought other partners in now. Okay. We have diagnostic companies, we're providing remote ultrasounds, we have other pharmaceutical partners. So really that success came from being able to partner, and now we've demonstrated this, and we're looking to the government to help take this over now.
Okay. Congratulations. Stephen, what is the role of global business in achieving health equity and social fairness? And where have you seen success in partnering with social innovators to create scaled sustainable impact?
Sure. I think, where the companies fit in is really to Dr. Ouma's point, and what you're seeing is results, right? What are we about is action and results, so we don't like talking about stuff. And I think if there's some magic that happened in COVID, it truly is the combination of the private sector and the public coming together, right, in certain ways. So there were, flaws here and there, but overall, I think at the end of the day, when you look at the testing and you look at the vaccines in the world, they were developed by the private sector in conjunction, certainly with the public sector and everything else. And I think that was magical. The other piece we learned is what gets measured gets acted upon. And as a diagnostics company, we've always thought about that. And, we started, and actually during COVID, is the Hologic Global Women's Health Index, which is we screen talk to 120,000 women around the world every year, and now have hard data. Because what's always amazed me is, probably being raised by a single mom and with a sister, is watching how women's health has been underappreciated in the world. And I feel like a couple of things have happened here, and kept thinking, why is it? And so as a company that's heavily focused on women's health in mammography, HPV testing, everything else, and then we pivoted to COVID, is what can we do to elevate the role of women's health in the world? Because that is going to elevate families, communities, societies. And let's face it, so much is still not said about women's health, right? And most men, most women don't even speak up about it, or men turn the other way. And I think it has kept women's health low, which, by the way, has kept societies down. So what we're trying to do is certainly advocate to elevate the profile of women's health around the world, because as we do that, everything comes up. And if we can take just a fraction of the energy that was spent addressing COVID to address women's health issues, because in the meantime, a lot of women's health issues, a lot of screening has gone backwards. And the other thing we should learn from COVID, and I think it's back to what have we learned from the private sector, is screening is one of the most effective things of everything, right? We learned how to screen for COVID, but meanwhile, we've barely been screening for breast and cervical cancer and all kinds of other stuff, especially during the pandemic. And if anything, we should be heightening our awareness, because screening is good for the individual, it's good for the society, and frankly, it's cheaper for society by far when we catch anything early.
Exactly. So maybe, Stephen, add a quick rider on that. So how do we change, for example, the mindset around to appreciate that screening, for example, should be a major priority?
Yeah, I think it comes down to both a focus, the private sector and, all of us trying to help elevate it. We've got to get more awareness, candidly, I think, of a lot of male leaders, because I think you still have, if you look at a lot of the societies that are a little more developed in women's health and economically, they've had more women leaders in them over time. So I think it's getting that awareness up and creating, even funding mechanisms. But I think it's less about funding than it is urgency and action.
Exactly.
And so what we're trying to do is elevate that debate and bring the public sector and the private and the NGOs together.
Okay. Dr. Ouma, coming back to the issue of action, like yourself, this has been my biggest frustration during my career, is our seeming inability to take action. And what I find interesting, most interesting, I'd say, is that I work primarily in Africa. I've worked across maybe 30 countries in Africa. Even in countries where, for example, you can clearly see things have gotten worse in certain parameters, right? Those countries had partners who claimed to have been working on that. Those partners had funders who claimed to be working on that. Those partners have reported every year hitting their targets and have upward sloping graphs of progress. But yet, objectively, things have gotten worse. So how do we begin to fix this issue of almost like accountability for action to move beyond the talking that you mentioned?
He said it, what's measured is done.
Exactly.
But it has to be measured.
Exactly.
and who is measuring
Exactly.
is really the core of it. When we look at the resources that are going into countries, particularly in Africa, because we have a lot of data on that, and then you look at the outcomes, because the indicators don't lie.
Exactly.
If you're working somewhere and you're cleaning the floor, the next person who comes, you'll see a clean
The
floor.
clean floor, exactly.
But if you're sitting 10,000 miles away and then you're being told, the floor is clean, and next year, the floor is clean, and next year the floor is clean.
Exactly.
But there's no evidence for a clean floor.
Exactly.
Then that money is going somewhere else. It's not going into what should be measured.
Exactly.
So who is measuring?
Yeah.
We need to fix that. Okay. So what we are doing as Africa CDC is we are changing the conversation from there is an outbreak, you bring in the team of experts, they stay around for the duration of the outbreak, 2-3 months, sometimes a year, and then they fly out. That doesn't work. It has not changed the situation for outbreaks on the continent for the last many decades. So now we are changing that, and we are saying no. It takes about 1/10, 1 out of 10 of costs to have a local expert trained, and that local expert will respond. The day the outbreak is finished and you leave as a partner, that capacity remains in country.
Exactly.
And a good example is DRC. Today, if there was God forbid, if there was an Ebola outbreak in DRC, as Africa CDC, we don't send anybody. Okay. We provide support remotely because we have 90-odd experts that have been trained in different aspects of it. Now, they do the measuring more objectively because they don't have a vested interest. They are local.
Exactly.
And the measurements, when they give us and we compare with other measurements, there are distinct differences.
Exactly.
Therefore, when you have an objective measurement, then you can tell if your intervention is working or not. So we must change who is measuring. This will give you different results. And then we must also change the model of who is responding. Okay. Getting people from out to come and then they leave doesn't work. Exactly. Third is we must integrate it with government plans and action. That's why for us, we insist we don't support unless the government has okayed a particular path. That way you link it with the day you leave, the sustainability angle and the acceptance of the intervention by the government will result in a much better health system post whatever activity that was. Absolutely. But the reality is it's a job for most people. The response or lack of it.
Exactly.
It's a job for most people. Yeah. So they don't want it to end because if it ends, then they're out of a job.
Exactly.
And if we translate that mentality into the different aspects of what contributes to health on the continent, you'll see the investment is big, but the results are really very small. Okay. So it has to change, and it has to be locals who are going to provide the priorities and who are going to give the solutions and whose capacity is going to be built in giving results that is measured, and those will translate into better indicators. Good example is Rwanda. From the very beginning, they took over the measurement. Yeah, exactly. And there is no partner who comes into Rwanda and then says they have done X, Y, Z. It doesn't work like that. Everything has to pass through one channel. Exactly. And what you're saying you have done is looked at if you truly have done it. And it works because the results and the indicators in that country are changing. Now, flip that with a crisis affected country on the continent. I'll not mention names when it comes to crisis. Huge amounts of money go in, but nothing comes out. Exactly. There is absolutely no need to buy 10 4x4 wheel drive vehicles, air conditioned, to go to a village which doesn't have running water. Exactly. Sell all the vehicles, give water, and the crisis is finished. Exactly. So who measures is very, very critical to what is going to change the way in which the investment gives results.
Thank you. Thank you. Monika, social entrepreneurs have a whole bunch of challenges in terms of engaging and, more importantly, scaling up. And constantly we hear the themes of lack of access to capital, lack of willingness for government to engage them, for example, directly as partners. What are your thoughts related to this? And based on the work that you've been doing, do you have any suggestions for different approaches to this issue?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point. And I mean, the way we are looking at it is building ecosystems. Yeah, I mean, it's all about collaboration. So can they, I mean, not working in isolation, but also, as you said, I mean, can they work together? Yeah, and we have also a nice example. One of the entrepreneurs that we are supporting provides also medicine in rural areas. So she built a platform that connects in Nigeria the pharmacies. And then also people can online order it, and then it's still transported even into rural areas. And then there was another entrepreneur, and she provides healthcare services, online virtual healthcare services, very effectively, called Zuri Health. And so we had also a larger gathering, and now they are collaborating because, of course, on the platform where you order pharmacies, you can now also access healthcare services. So I think that's really, can you scale by collaborating and see where do innovation fit together? And that's, I think, something we can support and others can support to bring them together, and then maybe have also initial starting opportunities from a financing perspective. And then, of course, also, I mean, we as a foundation, we see us as a catalyst, so we can get things started, but then also expose them, helping to expose to investors, also on the ground, and to help them to get the required visibility. Yeah, these are things we can provide.
And I imagine initiatives like the Global Alliance for
absolutely they are
is a mechanism now.
It's absolutely a mechanism, exactly. And to find out. And then, of course, the other aspect is also helping to advance collaboration with corporates. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the third element, among each other with the public sector, but then also with corporates, as you also provide service. So that's also another way. How can we integrate them into the procurement system into corporates? Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to open to the audience to ask any questions that you may have of our panel. Just introduce yourself briefly and then ask your question.
Greetings, thank you very much. My name is Azza Karam, and I serve an organization called Religions for Peace. This may seem like a question out of the blue. Brilliant discussion, by the way, but my question is this. Religious women, women of faith, constitute quite a significant sector within the broad social service domain, especially within health, but definitely not only. And it's a sector that's very difficult to give resources to, even though they are providing remarkable amounts of services, largely on a volunteer basis. I'm struggling to figure out ways and means of trying to support many of these religious women's organizations, especially when they are working together as opposed to working within their respective churches, mosques, synagogue, or whatever community. And the struggle is very real, and I'm wondering whether anyone on the panel can give me some guidance as to where can I find resources for that particular community, women, multi-faith, working in the social service sector in their respective countries. And a number of them, by the way, work in the sub-Saharan African context. They are the backbone of many of the health service providers. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone like to take that?
May I attempt?
Yes, please.
Not take, but attempt. So one key tool that we are using on the continent is community health workers, defined broadly. And we call them different things from one country to the other. The vast majority of them are women. And especially when you go out into the rural areas, they will be strongly aligned to one faith or the other. What has worked for us, and especially in COVID, and I'll pick out Cameroon here, is when we linked community health workers with their religious institution, whether it was a church, a mosque, at the community level, the uptake of vaccination just shot up. We are still trying to analyze what were the real drivers,
exactly,
but it just shot up. Preliminarily, what we are seeing is when the messaging is synced between the religious places and the community worker, not just the health worker, but the community worker, because they are right down at the community. Those two sort of come and provide a lot of synergy in messaging and therefore change in healthcare behavior. And we've taken that in Uganda, where we had Ebola recently, and they call them village health teams. It was exactly the same. 80% were women. And wherever we brought on board the religious institution, then the change was very, very rapid. So it's an area, we're not doing anything about it directly, but just by inference, because we are supporting community health workers, we are working with the religious institutions, that synergy is just amazing, particularly for us on the continent of Africa. But where you can be able to get direct support for them, this will be a challenge for us as the Africa Union, because we work with everybody. But what we see at the community level is that link. And we are happy to support that kind of work, because it gives us access to communities in a way that no other health innovation so far has been able to do on the continent.
So that's why I'm asking, where can I find it? Exactly the question brilliantly, and then my question still stands.
Yeah.
I'm looking for sources of support.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, in terms of supporting the work, as Africa CDC, that we provide on the continent, we actually provide resources for community health workers to be able to do their work. Now, when we categorize them specifically as women of faith, then at the Africa Union level, it will become a challenge to do that. But if we say it is community health workers, and the vast majority of that will be women of faith anyway, then we can be able to support that.
I'd like to add to
Yeah,
that.
please.
So we work with frontline health workers, and having a woman who's from the community makes the biggest difference, because that trust deficit is gone, right? And so you might have women who you can skill and up, and train, and maybe you don't have them, but then you create those pockets, and you create those groups of women. So we've gone into communities. We've identified, maybe they had high school, maybe they've studied up to grade 8, but we found women who matched that role, and then we trained them and we connected them with other resources. Because when that person is in community, and imagine we're doing telemedicine. So for us to go into a rural community where male members are freaking out, that they have a video, and what are you going to do with these videos of our family members? So initially we don't do that. We get their consent, they speak on audio, and once they get to understand and they trust us, adoption is not an issue then. The other thing is we engage the local religious leaders or the local community leaders. So we have meetings with the elders in the community, and we speak to them and we have conversation, and that dialogue really helps us accelerate our work. So I'm not really sure which community you're in, but maybe it will be about building those communities. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So believe it or not, we literally have less than 2 minutes left in our session. So that's flown by really fast. But before we close, I'd like to actually invite the director of the Schwab Foundation and the head of social innovation at the World Economic Forum, Dr. Francois Bonici, to make a few comments.
Thank you so much, Ernest, for moderating this fantastic panel, and thank you to all the speakers. Let's have a round of applause. Thank you so much. So I wanted to briefly mention, as Monika did, this report, Inclusive Health Systems, Innovations Towards Health Equity in Africa, which was in partnership with the Global Alliance, the Bertha Center for Social Innovation at the University of Cape Town, Impact Hub, Impact Intelligence and Influence. And in fact, BroadReach was one of the organizations interviewed and studied as part of this extensive research that Monika spoke about. What it does is it offers some evidence rather than just a narrative around why social entrepreneurs can be a critical partner in driving health equity and systemic change in health systems that we know are needed. As a part of the health system, that includes faith-based organizations, many of which are community-based organizations. We see them as part of health systems that can drive equity. And it also identifies the opportunities for investment, for partnership, for resources to be able to do that in terms of digital solutions, in terms of more equitable community health-based solutions, etc. Tomorrow, a bit of a sneak peek, there will be an announcement and a pledge, the Zero Health Gaps pledge, which will be announced tomorrow in a press release and a press conference around a commitment to health equity from a number of companies and civil society organizations. And we invite those companies, and we invite many other partners here and virtually who are part of the World Economic Forum's network to partner with the Global Alliance for Social Entrepreneurship to drive health equity action and bring that pledge to action and consider joining the pledge in future. So that's it from me to sign off and to thank everyone again for today, for this really important session and bringing this to the annual meeting in Davos. All the best.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, panelists.